And welcome to another episode of John Wayne Gacy, where we take deep dives into history's most disturbing events, personalities, urban legends, and in the not-too-distant future, conspiracy theory. Today, we continue our discovery and study of John Wayne Gacy, the Killer Clown. Now, we've covered everything from his childhood to his first incarceration to his rebirth as a prominent citizen in Chicago, Illinois. And now we arrive at him having that itch to scratch again. It's showing up. And today, we are going to talk about John Wayne Gacy's victims that he managed to kill. Out of respect to them, we're going to show their faces. You might hear my voice, but probably won't see me again until the conclusion of this video. And you won't see very many pictures of Gacy. And without further delay, shall we continue our study of John Wayne Gacy, Killer Clown, and this, the body.
In our most recent episode, we talked about John Wayne Gacy and how he was warming up to slay and how a young Tenducci narrowly escaped from becoming body number 1 in the body count. We also left you with a promise to come back and give you all the details we could about those who actually fell victim to John Wayne Gacy. So without further delay, we present to you the body count. Gacy's reign of terror encompassed the tragic loss of a minimum of 33 young men and boys. Shockingly, he buried 26 of his victims within the crawl space of his house. Among these victims were those he knew personally and unsuspecting individuals he lured from various locations, such as Chicago's Greyhound bus station, Bughouse Square, or off the streets. Gacy employed deceitful tactics, promising job opportunities with PDM, enticing with substances like drinks or drugs, or offering money for sexual acts. Some victims were forcibly abducted, while others were deceived into believing Gacy, who often carried a sheriff's badge and had special lights on his black Oldsmobile, was a law enforcement officer. In certain instances, he managed to commit double murders in a single evening. Upon luring a victim to his residence, Gacy consistently followed a grim pattern. He would manipulate his target by providing alcohol, drugs, or cultivating a sense of trust. Gacy introduced a pair of handcuffs into the scene under the guise of demonstrating a magic trick, often as part of his clown persona. He would first secure his own hands behind his back and then covertly release himself with a concealed key. This maneuver was presented as an engaging trick to the victim. With the victim confined, Gacy would proceed to perpetrate acts of rape and torture, starting by sitting on or straddling the victim's chest. He compelled the victim into performing oral sex. Gacy's torture escalated to include barbaric acts such as burning victims with cigars, forcing them to mimic a horse as he directed them, and subjecting them to sexual violations with foreign objects following sodomy. Employing tactics reminiscent of the Houston mass murders, he frequently secured the victim's ankles with handcuffs to a 2x4. Throughout their torment, Gacy tormented his captives and, disturbingly, would at times partially drown them in the bathtub before resuscitating them repeatedly. Gacy's method of killing often involved placing a rope tourniquet around the victims' necks and tightening it incrementally using a hammer handle. This sinister act was referred to as the rope trick, with Gacy frequently declaring to his victims, "This is the last trick." The victims endured horrifying convulsions lasting sometimes hours before succumbing to death, although a few tragically died due to suffocation from cloth gags shoved deeply into their throats. With the exception of his final 2 victims, the majority of these murders occurred between the hours of 3 and 6 a.m. Gacy adhered to a morbid routine, storing the corpses beneath his bed for up to 24 hours before ultimately burying them in the crawl space. Quicklime was periodically used to expedite decomposition within this burial site. Some victims faced even more grotesque fates, being transported to Gacy's garage and embalmed before their eventual burial. The slain, Gacy's inaugural known murder transpired on January 3, 1972. As per Gacy's subsequent recollection, he embarked on this heinous act following a family gathering the preceding night. In the early hours, he drove to the Civic Center in Chicago's Loop to witness a presentation of ice sculptures. Subsequently, he enticed 16-year-old Timothy Jack McCoy from the Greyhound bus terminal into his vehicle. McCoy, en route to his father's residence in Omaha, Nebraska, informed Gacy that his Nebraska-bound bus wasn't scheduled until noon. Gacy capitalized on this information, proposing a sightseeing tour of Chicago and subsequently extending an offer for McCoy to spend the remainder of the night at his home, with the promise of a ride back to the station for his bus. prior to McCoy's identification. He was referred to as the Greyhound busboy. According to Gacy, the following morning he woke up to find McCoy in his bedroom doorway, brandishing a kitchen knife. In response, Gacy swiftly reacted by getting out of bed, and McCoy inadvertently cut Gacy's forearm in the process. Gacy managed to disarm McCoy, but McCoy raised his arms in surrender. Gacy retaliated by slamming McCoy's head against the bedroom wall and propelling him into the wardrobe. In turn, McCoy struck Gacy in the stomach, temporarily immobilizing him. Gacy subsequently wrestled McCoy to the floor and subjected him to a series of fatal stab wounds to the chest. As McCoy's life ebbed away, Gacy claimed to have cleansed the knife in his bathroom before proceeding to the kitchen, where he encountered the makings of a breakfast table set for two. McCoy had set the table for both of them and entered Gacy's room while inadvertently carrying the knife. Following the gruesome event, Gacy buried McCoy in the crawl space beneath his house, covering the grave with a layer of concrete to conceal his malevolent act. In a subsequent interview conducted several years after his apprehension, Gacy recounted feeling utterly depleted immediately after killing McCoy. He disclosed that during the act itself, he experienced a chilling realization that death was the ultimate thrill. He even described a perverse sensation of euphoria as he inflicted harm and observed McCoy's suffering. Gacy asserted that he committed his second murder roughly in January 1974. The identity of this victim remains unknown. However, Gacy detailed that after strangling the victim, he placed the body in his closet prior to interment. Disturbingly, Gacy recalled that bodily fluid seeped from the victim's mouth and nose, resulting in the staining of his carpet. In light of this, Gacy adopted a gruesome practice in his subsequent crimes. He frequently employed rags, the victim's undergarments, or socks to obstruct the mouths of subsequent victims, thus preventing any such leakage. On July 31, 1975, the unsettling disappearance of 18-year-old John Butkovich, an employee of PDM, came to the fore. Butkovich's vanishing act the day prior to his puzzling disappearance, Butkovich had confronted Gacy regarding unpaid wages that were overdue. It was then that Butkovich's father contacted Gacy, who expressed a willingness to aid in the search for the young man but lamented that Butkovich seemed to have run away. During questioning by the police, Gacy asserted that Butkovich, accompanied by two friends, had visited his residence and raised the issue of his withheld pay. Gacy contended that a compromise had been reached and all three had departed. Over the subsequent 3 years, Butkovich's parents diligently called the authorities more than 100 times, imploring them to conduct a more extensive investigation into Gacy. In subsequent admissions, Gacy disclosed that he encountered Butkovich as he exited his car, signaling to catch his attention. Butkovich reportedly approached Gacy, affirming, "I want to talk to you." Gacy then invited Butkovich into his vehicle before luring him back to his house, ostensibly to address the matter of the unpaid wages. Once at Gacy's residence, a drink was offered to Butkovich, and Gacy manipulated him into allowing his wrist to be restrained with handcuffs. Subsequently, Gacy confessed to a harrowing sequence of events. He disclosed having sat on the kid's chest for a while before ultimately strangling him. Afterward, Gacy concealed Butkovich's body within his garage, intending to bury it within the crawl space at a later point. However, Gacy's wife and stepdaughters arrived home sooner than anticipated, prompting him to inter Butkovich's remains beneath the concrete floor of a tool room extension in his garage. This makeshift grave occupied a void where he initially planned to dig a drain tile. In tandem with the expansion of his business, Gacy openly acknowledged that 1975 marked the initiation of his escalated pursuits for encounters with young males. He commonly referred to these pursuits as his cruising endeavors. The span from 1976 to 1978 witnessed Gacy's most prolific series of murders, coinciding with his increasingly solitary existence after his divorce. While Gacy maintained an outwardly affable demeanor and continued to engage in community activities, discerning neighbors noticed shifts in his behavior after his divorce in 1976. They observed him in the company of young males, heard his car coming and going during the early morning hours, and witnessed lights flickering on and off in his residence during the small hours of the day. Recollections from one neighbor revealed that for several years, muffled and high-pitched screams, along with shouts and cries, repeatedly disturbed her and her son's sleep in the early morning hours. These unsettling noises were traced to a neighboring house on West Somerdale Avenue. Just a month after finalizing his divorce, Gacy plunged into the depths of darkness by abducting and murdering 18-year-old Daryl Sampson, last seen alive in Chicago on April 6, 1976. Concealing a cloth in his throat, Gacy buried Sampson under the dining room floor. The chilling sequence continued on May 14th, when 15-year-old Randall Reffitt vanished after returning home from a dental appointment. Almost concurrently, 14-year-old Samuel Stapleton disappeared while making his way home from his sister's apartment. closely following Reffitt's disappearance. Both Stapleton and Reffitt, who were known to each other, were laid to rest together in the crawl space. Investigators speculate that the two were killed on the same fateful evening. June 3rd witnessed Gacy's gruesome act in taking the life of 17-year-old Michael Bonin, who disappeared while traveling from Chicago to Waukegan. Gacy employed a mere 10 days later. 16-year-old William Carroll met the same tragic fate and was interred in a shared grave within the crawl space. Carroll marked the inception of a series of 4 victims, all presumed to have been killed between June 13 and August 6, 1976. 3 of them, aged 16 to 17, fell prey to Gacy, while an unidentified adult victim also suffered this horrifying fate. August 5th saw the last known communication of 16-year-old James Hawkinson, who phoned his family, potentially from Gacy's residence. Hawkinson met his end due to suffocation and was laid to rest beneath 17-year-old Rick Johnston, who was last sighted alive on August 6th. Gacy's gruesome spree expanded, with 2 unidentified male victims claimed between August and October 1976. On October 24th, teenage friends Kenneth Parker and Michael Marino were abducted and killed, having been last spotted on Clark Street in Chicago. Merely 2 days later, 19-year-old construction worker William Bundy vanished after notifying his family of an upcoming party attendance. Bundy met his demise due to suffocation and was buried beneath Gacy's master bedroom. Strangely, Bundy had apparently worked for Gacy prior to his disappearance. The chilling calendar progressed to November and December 1976, when 21-year-old Francis Alexander was snuffed out. His family's last contact with him was a November phone call to his mother, and his absence wasn't reported as it was believed he had relocated to Gacy concealed Alexander's body beneath the room he used as his office. The haunting echoes of December 1976 brought another grim chapter as 17-year-old Gregory Godzik, an employee of PDM, vanished. His girlfriend last saw him outside her home after a date in which he had driven her back. Godzik's tenure at PDM was under 3 weeks when he disappeared. Suspicion deepened as Godzik's family learned he had been involved in digging trenches for drain tiles in Gacy's crawl space. His abandoned car added to the ominous mystery. Godzik's family confronted Gacy about his disappearance, only to receive claims that he wished to run away. Gacy even alleged receiving an answering machine message from Godzik post-disappearance, though he could not provide any proof. The year 1977 saw Gacy's dark saga of death continue, with each event more haunting than the last. On January 20th, Gacy used the ruse of purchasing 19-year-old John Shike's Plymouth Satellite to lure him to his house. Confessing later, Gacy revealed he strangled Shike in his spare bedroom, with Rossi sleeping in the house that night. Gacy then sold the car to Rossi for $300. Just 2 months later, on March 15th, 20-year-old John Prestige vanished, last seen leaving a near North Side restaurant. He was buried above the body of Fred. Before his disappearance, Prestige had mentioned gaining employment with a local contractor. Another unidentified youth met the same tragic fate, his body hidden in the crawl space during the spring or early summer of 1977. On July 5th, 19-year-old Matthew Bowman from Crystal Lake was killed by Gacy. His last known sighting was by his mother at a suburban train station, where he was heading for a court appointment in Harwood Heights. The ensuing month saw Rossi's arrest for stealing gasoline while driving Shike's car. The gas station attendant noted the license plate, leading police to trace the car back to Gacy's residence. Gacy informed the officers that Shike had sold the car to him in February, claiming he needed money to leave town. A verification of the VIN confirmed the car's history with Shike. The police, however, did not delve deeper, merely informing Shike's mother of her son's car sale. As 1977 drew to a close, Gacy's tally of victims rose by 6 more young lives, aged 16 to 21. The first was 18-year-old Robert Gilroy, the son of a Chicago police sergeant, last seen alive on September 15th. Living just blocks from Gacy's residence, Gilroy was buried in the crawl space. Gacy's presence in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, supervising a remodeling project from September 12th to September 16th, exonerated him from the time frame of Gilroy's disappearance. This, in turn, led to speculation about the involvement of potential accomplices in multiple murders. 10 days after Gilroy vanished, 19-year-old ex-U.S. Marine strangled by Gacy, Maury found his resting place beneath the master bedroom floor. On October 17th, 21-year-old Russell Nelson, who was seeking contracting work, was last spotted outside a Chicago bar. Nelson met a grim fate, his body hidden beneath the guest bedroom. Just under a month later, Gacy murdered 16-year-old Robert Winch and buried him within the crawl space. The chilling cycle continued as 20-year-old Tommy Bowling disappeared on November 18th after leaving a Chicago bar. On December 9th, 19-year-old U.S. Marine David Tausma vanished after informing his mother about attending a rock concert in Hammond, Indiana. Tausma's life was cut short by Gacy, his body laid to rest in proximity to John Morey's. The year concluded with a horrifying climax as Gacy abducted 19-year-old college student Robert Donnelly at gunpoint from a Chicago bus stop on December 30th. Dragged to Gacy's home, Donnelly faced an ordeal of rape, torture, and repeated drownings in a bathtub, all while Gacy taunted him with disturbing comments. Donnelly later testified that he was in such agony that he begged Gacy to end his life. After hours of torment, Gacy ultimately returned Donnelly to his workplace, issuing a chilling warning to stay silent, knowing that the world wouldn't believe him if he spoke out. In 1978, the shadows cast by Gacy's actions grew longer, enveloping more lives in their chilling grasp. Donnelly summoned the courage to report the horrifying assault, leading to a police interrogation of Gacy on January 6, 1978. Gacy did admit to a slave sex dynamic with Donnelly, but insisted it was consensual, deflecting responsibility by asserting that he hadn't paid Donnelly the money he had promised him. Law enforcement accepted his story without pressing charges. The subsequent month witnessed the demise of 19-year-old William Kindred, who vanished on February 16th after informing his fiancée, someone acquainted with Gacy, that he was heading to a bar. Kindred's tragic fate marked the final burial within the crowded crawl space. March 21st saw Gacy ensnare 26-year-old Jeffrey Rignall into his vehicle. Rignall was drugged with chloroform, taken to Gacy's home, and subjected to a nightmarish ordeal. Restrained by a ceiling-mounted pillory device and foot restraints, he was raped and tortured using candles and whips while being repeatedly rendered unconscious by chloroform. Gacy abandoned Rignall in Lincoln Park, alive but unconscious. Rignall managed to reach his girlfriend's place, where the police were informed of the assault. Despite this, they didn't probe further into Gacy's activities. Rignall's memory provided crucial details about Gacy's car, the route taken, and the surroundings. Alongside two friends, Rignall staked out the Cumberland exit of the expressway and, in April, spotted the Oldsmobile. Their pursuit led them to 8213 West Summerdale. Gacy's arrest followed on July 15th, and he faced charges of assault and battery against Rignall. By mid-1978, the crawl space could no longer accommodate more victims. Gacy later disclosed to the authorities that he had contemplated using his attic for body storage but had concerns about potential leakage complications. Consequently, he resorted to discarding his victims off the I-55 bridge into the Des Plaines River. Gacy revealed that he had tossed 5 bodies into the river during 1978, believing that one had landed on a passing barge. However, only 4 were ever recovered. The first individual cast from the bridge was 20-year-old Timothy O'Rourke. His life was extinguished in mid-June after he left his apartment to buy cigarettes. Just before disappearing, O'Rourke had informed his roommate about a job offer from a contractor on the northwest side. On November 4th, Gacy claimed the life of 19-year-old Frank Landingen. His father last spotted him walking along Foster Avenue, and his lifeless, unclothed body was discovered near a Des Plaines River inlet by 2 duck hunters on November 12th. Then, on November 24th, 20-year-old James Mazzara vanished after Thanksgiving dinner with his family. The day before, Mazzara had told his sister about his construction work. He was last seen walking in the direction of Bughouse Square. On the afternoon of December 11, 1978, Gacy visited the Nissen Pharmacy in Des Plaines to discuss a potential remodeling deal with the store owner, Phil Torf. As fate would have it, Gacy's conversation with Torf occurred within earshot of 15-year-old part-time employee Robert Peast. During their conversation, Gacy casually mentioned that his firm often hired teenage boys at a remarkable starting wage of $5 per hour, nearly twice the pay young Peast earned at the pharmacy. After Gacy left, Peast's mother arrived at the store, intending to drive her son home and celebrate her birthday together as a family. Little did she know, her son's life was about to take a tragic turn. Peast, intrigued by the prospect of a job opportunity, asked his mother to wait, explaining that some contractor wants to talk to me about a job. With that, he left the store at 9 p.m., promising a swift return. Tragically, Peast's encounter with Gacy would be his last. He was murdered shortly after 10 p.m. at Gacy's residence. The significance of Peast's disappearance cannot be overstated, as it was this event that thrust the spotlight onto Gacy. Gacy recounted that at his house, he offered Peast a soft drink before broaching the topic of what he wouldn't do for the right price. Peast's response, that he didn't mind hard work, was met with Gacy suggesting that good money could be earned through a different avenue. Peast remained dismissive. Gacy then skillfully deceived Peast into donning handcuffs. The accounts of Gacy's subsequent actions vary, but in an initial statement, he admitted that Peast offered no resistance as his pants were removed. Gacy further confessed that, while placing the rope around Peast's neck, the young boy was crying, scared. Even more chillingly, Gacy later confessed that he received a phone call from a business acquaintance while Peast was still alive, fighting for his life. Following Robert Peast's failure to return home, His worried family promptly filed a missing person report with the Des Plaines police. Phil Torf, the store owner, implicated Gacy as the contractor whom Piest had likely left the store to meet. Lieutenant Joseph Kozingzak, driven by a personal connection as his son attended the same school as Piest, took the lead in intensifying the investigation into Gacy's activities. A background check on Gacy unveiled a troubling history, including a prior battery charge in Chicago and imprisonment in Iowa for the sodomy of a 15-year-old boy. Lieutenant Kozingzak, accompanied by 2 officers, visited Gacy's residence the next evening. Gacy claimed that he had inquired about remodeling materials with one of the pharmacy's youths, whom he assumed was Piest. However, he was adamant that he had not offered Piest a job and had merely returned to the store to retrieve his appointment book around 8 p.m. He agreed to make a statement at the police station later that night but delayed due to a family death. Responding to their inquiries about his availability, he criticized the officers for their perceived lack of respect for the deceased. At 3:20 a.m., Gacy arrived at the police station covered in mud, attributing his condition to a car accident. Later that day, he reiterated his lack of involvement in Piest's disappearance and continued to deny offering him a job. Gacy's claim that he had returned to the pharmacy at Torf's request was contradicted by Torf himself, who denied making such a call. In response to investigators' request, Gacy furnished a written account detailing his activities on December 11th. Des Plaines police obtained a search warrant on December 13th, suspecting that Gacy might have Piest at his home. The search yielded several concerning items, including police badges, a starter pistol, a syringe, handcuffs, explicit books, and other suspicious paraphernalia. Notably, they found a class ring engraved with Jas and a Nissan pharmacy receipt along with a piece of nylon rope in the trash, suggestive of foul play. As the investigation continued, Gacy was placed under surveillance, and his vehicles were confiscated for examination. During this period, crucial information surfaced from Michael Rossi, who revealed the disappearance of Gregory Godzik and Charles Hatchula, both connected to PDM. Gacy's battery charge history and his criminal activities further came to light, deepening suspicions. By December 16th, Gacy's interactions with the surveillance detectives had become almost cordial, with him even inviting them for meals. This dynamic allowed officers to gather more insights into his behavior. Interviews with witnesses and colleagues revealed more concerning details, including previous incidents of abuse and Gacy's ominous statement that clowns can get away with murder. As the pressure mounted, Gacy's behavior showed signs of strain, and he sought to divert the investigation by filing a civil suit against the Des Plaines police. A critical breakthrough occurred when Kimberly Byers, a colleague of Piest, identified the Nissan pharmacy photo receipt, further linking Piest to Gacy's activities. As the pressure mounted, Gacy's behavior showed signs of strain, and he sought to divert the investigation by filing a civil suit against the Des Plaines police. A critical breakthrough occurred when Kimberly Byers, a colleague of Piest, identified the Nissan pharmacy photo receipt, further linking Piest to Gacy's activities. A second search warrant was obtained, leading to more suspicious discoveries, and Rossi's revelations about the lime-spreading task that Gacy had assigned him took on a sinister meaning. On December 20th, Gacy's erratic behavior heightened, leading the police to arrest him on drug-related charges to ensure he remained in custody during the ongoing investigation. Amid these developments, Gacy's veneer of denial began to crumble. During a confrontation with his lawyers, he unexpectedly confessed to his numerous crimes, setting the stage for his formal confession to the police. Gacy's revelations about his victims, his modus operandi, and his actions painted a chilling picture of his heinous acts. The search for evidence intensified as the trial unfolded. Gacy's mental state became a central theme. His defense team argued insanity, while the prosecution contended he was fully aware of his actions. Witnesses recounted their harrowing experiences with Gacy, revealing his sadistic tendencies. The trial culminated in Gacy's conviction on 33 counts of murder, making it one of the most significant criminal cases in U.S. history. Incarcerated on death row, Gacy's eccentric artwork and attempts at appeal filled his days. Despite numerous legal challenges, his conviction and sentence were upheld, and his execution date was set. Gacy's execution marked the end of a chapter. His execution faced complications, but ultimately proceeded, bringing closure to the victims' families and the end to the reign of terror that John Wayne Gacy had inflicted on countless lives.
Thank you for joining us for another episode of Darker Things. We hope that you were intrigued by what you saw. If you like what you saw today, please don't forget to hit that like button. Now, Gacy certainly was a compelling individual, and he certainly met with a not-so-climactic end. Regardless of whether you believe in his innocence or not, This story merits telling. Because those who don't learn from history, who don't learn to figure out what makes people do what they do, we might just be participants in helping to perpetuate such things. Again, thank you for joining us. If you'd like to not miss any episodes, make sure you hit that subscribe button and hit the bell to make sure you get all the notifications. Until next time, I'm your host, Doug Duncan, reminding you that once you enter the dark, you may never be the same.